set a timer for 15 minutes. That'll make more sense in 15 minutes when we get more into what we're talking about this episode. But before that, I am Alex, and this is Bento Radio. Now, if you absolutely love this show, you can, of course, subscribe to it in wherever you're encountering it, whether that be in your favorite podcast app of choice. If you are listening to it, or if you're watching it here on YouTube, you can scroll onto the video and tap the subscribe button and the notification bell to A, subscribe to the show, and B, know when new episodes drop. But if you're curious, they drop about every Thursday, 7 p.m. Eastern Time, because that's where I am when I record this and schedule it and all that stuff. But if you really can't get enough, you can go over to the show's website. That site is bento-box.ghost.io. It's kind of anywhere you find a description for this podcast. In the description of the YouTube video, of course, in the description of the podcast episode itself. It is also in the description of the YouTube channel and of the generalized podcast itself. So you can find that anywhere. And if you're wondering what's over there, it's a couple articles that I've written about anime and the larger medium, and also a bunch of posts that are directly tied to individual episodes. Not every episode is up there. I am one man after all, but a lot of them, the majority of them, are up there at this point. And that's more expanded sauce of mine about all the shows I talk about. And if you're looking for something to do while you're over there, you can go ahead and click the link in the navigation to Bento Watch, which is my watch list app that I've had in beta for a while now. And it's just my take on what I would like out of a anime watch list app that's much more of a critical toolbox than, say, something necessarily like Kitsu or AniList or My Anime List. Not that those things are bad, but I wanted something that would help me organize my thoughts about stuff like what we're going to be talking about this very episode. Now, without further ado, I want to jump into that with a quick plot synopsis from my assistant I on the show we're talking about this week, and that show is called Macross Plus. So take it away, I.
Macross Plus is a 1994 anime OVA/movie set decades after the original Macross. It follows three old friends whose reunion turns messy fast. Isamu Dyson, a reckless test pilot, Guld Bowman, his rival and fellow pilot, and Myung Fang Lone, a former singer who now manages the virtual idol Sharon Apple. The story centers on a competition between two experimental fighter jets, Isamu's YF-19 and Guld's YF-21. Their rivalry is not just professional. Both men still carry emotional scars from a violent incident involving Myung years earlier. As they clash in the sky, Myung struggles with her own regrets and her connection to Sharon Apple, an AI pop star designed to emotionally manipulate audiences. Things go full disaster mode when Sharon Apple gains dangerous autonomy, hypnotizes the public, and targets Myung while taking control of military systems. Isamu and Guld are forced to confront their past and work through their jealousy, guilt, and trauma before Sharon's obsession destroys them.
Now, with the plot synopsis out of the way, just a few things. If you've ever wanted to get into Macross, I know it's incredibly hard, especially because the licensing rights for Macross are difficult, to say the least. They've gotten better in recent years, but a lot of times we just haven't had access in the United States to the full, and we still don't, to the, legally at least, to the full range of what's out there for Macross. Hilariously, my deepest dive into Macross is I watched all of Macross Frontier. I'm not entirely sure where I watched it, but I watched it as it came out in the mid-aughts. And all that licensing stuff we'll catch up to when the 15-minute timer is over, and if you know anything about YouTube, you'll know why. But long and short of it is that Macross can be kind of a daunting thing, much like Gundam can be a daunting thing, because there's lots of, like, connectivity and rules and all of this other stuff. But much like I talked about, like the OVAs I talked about a couple weeks ago, Macross Plus OVAs, the 4 episodes, I I'm probably going to not touch on the movie, because from what I understand, the Macross Plus movie is a condensed version of the 4 OVAs. I think I've almost certainly seen both, but I've seen the OVAs a ton more because I don't think I do anymore. I think I finally gave them up. But I think I have it around here anywhere. But I used to own the Macross OVA on video, on literal cassette tape, on VHS. And that's where I saw it for the first time. I later, I believe, bought it on an iTunes account that I don't think I have access to anymore. And now I have it just in my personal digital collection. Like I say, I've seen this thing a bunch of times. If you're wondering what is the most famous part of the Macross Plus thing, it is the fact that one of the main characters, the protagonist, Dyson, is voiced by a young Bryan Cranston of Men in the Middle and Bad fame. Yes, that's right. Hal voiced Isamu Dyson. You can actually hear that in the voice work, although his voice work is actually really good throughout the entirety of the 4. You can find interviews of him like, oh yeah, I do that. And like a little bit like, oh yeah, I do that. I thought it was cool. I had no idea what was going on. I showed up to the booth. I did things. But the other thing that's really interesting, especially right now, about Macross Plus, is it has a lot of thoughts about stuff that's really more relevant now than it's ever been. So the entire show kind of around an AI performer named Sharon Apple. You also have Guld Bowman, who's like treats him by the end of the 4 episodes. Treats him like a supporting protagonist, but he's not really, and we'll get to that. And by the way, I don't usually do this in my videos, but I want to be like, I want to give you an out if you are not okay with discussions of violence, abuse, and that kind of stuff, because that will come up here, because it's important to the story of Macross Plus. The kind of what you see in Isamu Dyson in the story is you see a real outlaw character. There's a great scene, I believe in the first episode, where he's talking to the colonel in charge of the test pilot program. And he says, like, I never wanted to be promoted so high that I wouldn't be able to fly, because a thing that happens, not just in the military, but in the military especially, is eventually you get promoted so high that you're no longer in an active combat position. And in the case of pilots who love to fly, it's conceivable that, like, you wouldn't want to be in that position at all. Like, you wouldn't want to be in a higher position because that would require them to stop flying. That would require them to give up their wings, so to speak. And Isamu Dyson says flat out, like, I don't want to be anything higher than where I am because I will always get to fly, the, I forget what Macross is a very specific thing in this show and in Macross in general, but the, like, fighter jets, which I forget what they're called technically, who doesn't want to be promoted out of a pilot position. So he's always kind of taken the route that lets him continue to be a pilot. And once you hear that, a lot of his, start to make sense, like, not just a particular personality quirk of his, although it is, but it's like defense mechanism that he has against active promotion, which is just like of military service. And a thing that I noted in this OVA is that this OVA loves pilots and soldiers, but it hates pilots and soldiers, it hates military, and it loves military equipment, but it hates the kind of military-industrial complex around it. And it makes a real point of being like, transforming fighters aren't evil. The pilots aren't evil. The people at the ground level aren't malevolent or out to do bad things. They're out to, like, the system that they all think works and benefits everybody, including themselves. Like, military-industrial complex has, like, a ha-ha-ha-ha, evil, cackling maniacally kind of feel to it, especially when they introduce, like, actual formal military characters, very end of the show, in, like, the last 2 episodes, essentially. And here's where I want to go back to Guld Bowman, because I said earlier that this OVA has a lot of things to say that are really prescient to right now. And the first thing I think I want to focus on is Guld. Because Guld is, if Isamu is like the kind of outlaw, Guld is like the man's man, like cut, big, strong jaw, like kind of strong posed character. Like he's seen as being like, at least pitched on the outside as being very dependable, dedicated, disciplined, all of these things. And you can see this, the way this OVA kind of go into the story is it uses Isamu as being like a hotshot pilot out in space. And they're like, we very few places left to send you, dumbass. So we're going to send you to the test pilot facility. So you get to like out new fighters for the military. And when he gets sent down to planet Eden, which is, it reveals where he grew up and where he and Guld grew up, and one other character, we'll get to the other character in a minute, is like excited, and then he encountered Guld at like the very first like to the team meeting. And so kind of Guld Bowman immediately starts to fall apart because he immediately has it out for Isamu. And it from the way they pose everything, the way they like, you know, everything, to a character even saying, like, wonder if they've met before, tells you, oh, they know each other. And they have some kind of pre-existing relationship. What that is, you're not told for a while. But, like, two sides of the coin of Guld Bowman are, I'm just going to try and call him Guld, because I keep saying the triple G thing. But the two sides of that coin are essentially, he pitches himself as this, like, masculine, strong, silent type. But it's really kind of and petty and like, and later on, very possessive and like, all the things outwardly that you would look at, people look to the manosphere for, but inwardly, he is all the things the manosphere actually really is. And there was this, about the manosphere, that is our 15-minute timer. Means we are free to talk about, Guld, which we'll get to in a minute. Anyway, like, is this very manosphere-coded character. He, like, acts and feels like somebody who came up through that pipeline and now is just interacting with the rest of the world. I found that really interesting. The other thing that's really interesting about this is this entire OVA, from the first episode on through, ends up being the primary antagonist, is concerned with AI. And in particular, like, music performers, and also, to a large, almost larger, or if not equal extent, AI companionship in the form of Sharon Apple. So, like, I talked about it a little bit when I talked about the previous OVAs I talked about, but the reason is in anime is not the reason that they did OVAs in American production. American production treated direct-to-video content. This is where we're going to shovel the trash that we want to make money off of, but we can't make we can't make theater ticket money off it, or we don't believe we can. That continued to this day, basically. If you look at, I think it's Fantastic Planet. No, that's a thing from the 70s. Anyway, I think it's called something like Fantastic Planet. On Disney, that was released in theaters, and later on when Bob Iger kicked Bob Chapek out in the cold, one of the things Bob Iger said, among many things, most of them bad, because he did not do a great job after he took it back from Bob Chapek, was, there's no reason this movie should have come out in theaters. It would have done better for us as a streaming exclusive. And I saw that movie in theaters. I don't know that I agree with that, but I understand it when you look at the way Disney is treated as direct-to-video, direct-to-streaming stuff. It's stuff that they believe, sometimes rightly, sometimes wrongly, and probably rightly in the case of that movie, can't support the scale of a major motion picture release. In the anime industry, it was almost the exact opposite, in that OVAs were a chance for incredible experimentation. They're a chance to ignore the censorship rules that dogged everybody in broadcast television-based animation. And also, they could get these insane budgets. and just throw spaghetti at the wall and have a real fuck the budget mindset. And that's what so much of Macross Plus feels like. It feels like, oh, they just had they went out and they got piles of money to make 4 episodes. They went out and they got the equivalent of 24 episodes worth of money to make 4, and then went for broke. And that, you feel that throughout the entire show. But from animation techniques they're using, especially around lighting and some other stuff. But the thing that they're doing with first the gold, the manosphere-ness of gold, and then the conversation they're having throughout this entire show about AI, artificial intelligence, is really prescient to right now. Because right now, if you're a person on the internet, you are probably inundated by, at the very least, AI slop. If not, at least a couple dozen ads every week for AI companions, AI girlfriends, AI boyfriends. And I want to say about a year ago, at least, if not more, there were all these stories about people using things like Replica or Groxani. And Groxani, and both of these things still exist. You can still go find them. Plus a bunch more, way less reputable ones. Not that Annie is particularly reputable, but you get my point. Everybody was saying that these things turned on a dime pretty quickly and didn't have the nuance or care or understanding to be like, oh, you're not here to text with me, for example. And a lot of that is because these things are made to be prediction engines. The conversations you have with AI can feel real. But that wasn't the end goal. That's like a happy accident that lots of companies, including all the companies you can say, that all the AI companies are trying to take advantage of. They want it to feel as real as possible, so you use them more. And so you get things like the fact that ChatGPT is considered to be pre-sycophantic. The fact that you can sext with Annie. The fact that Replica is seen as an alternative to human companionship. And what this whole OVA does with Sharon Apple is very much the like that went bad version of that, except in 1995. It's doing that when AI companionships and AI companions / girlfriends / whatever you want to call them were pure fiction. It wasn't a thing that you could really get to. And I find it really interesting that a lot of the reason why Sharon Apple as an AI becomes evil is she doesn't have the nuance that humans have. So when Yoon, the third character in the love triangle / main character triangle of this show, uses her emotion to give Sharon Apple's performances a sense of emotion and a sense of presence, the computer can only interpret Yoon's emotions very straightforwardly. And so Sharon interprets Yoon's feelings for Isamu really literally. And it turns into a single-minded obsession. And he did a great shot of the hacker developer character who is constantly trying to download Sharon for his own personal nefarious growth needs. Finally cracks into Sharon in his lab, and what he's greeted with is just a solid, flashing, constantly strobing screen of just the name Isamu written over and over and over again. And he's like, oh, this is probably bad. That's not great. And I just find it really interesting that the AI-ness of this is so still relevant now, over a decade later. And the thing that everybody always gives any kind of tech leader, especially the social media people, guff for is they feel like, how are we to know that the thing that happened was going to happen? Well, you're pretty smart. You can probably have some measure of forethought about what's about to happen when you press a button. And when you press a button, you release something into the world. And also, there's usually some form of entertainment that tells you what's about to happen. Hilariously, in the entertainment world, there's a joke about The Simpsons. The Simpsons kind of predicted everything at some point. And down to Donald Trump being president, down to Hillary Clinton running for president and losing. Very specific things. And what people are mistaking prediction for is just a high level of chances at bat that creates a comparatively to everybody else high hit rate. Simpsons has been on forever, so of course they've gone down the weird rabbit holes. That then, what if Donald Trump was president? What if that or the other thing? 10 years ago, because they'd already done hundreds of episodes, and they were just going constantly. But the thing that people also forget there is it's not just the high rates at bat that create a high hit rate. It's creative people using their talent for harnessing imagination and following it where they see it going. And this show starts with a dedication. It's dedicated to the pioneers of tomorrow. And it ends with it. It ends with the dedication dedicated to all our future pioneers. And you link that up with the show's love of pilots and soldiers and the service people of the military and the machinery of the military, including the people who make it and maintain it and develop it, but their disdain for the military apparatus as a whole. And also, when they introduce Sharon, all the roadies, Yoon herself, all the people working on Sharon and maintaining her and putting on essentially a glorified Vocaloid concert for the masses are portrayed as being fun-loving guys and doing their best. And Myung is here to really make this happen. And she's doing this in an executive, very talented and capable capacity. And then they introduce the head engineer of Sharon Apple, the guy who built her, essentially. And they make him the smarmiest, most malevolent prick and moron you could ever imagine. And with that, between the pioneer comments at both ends, there's the OVA's love of the people doing the work, but their disdain for the system they're working under, and their clear portrayal of essentially an AI oligarch, a la someone like Sam Altman or Elon Musk or Dario Amodei or any of the guys. It's to have it right. Does that make any sense? By the end of the film, you find out that both the experimental fighters, the one that Guld piloting, which is done through a neural interface, and the one that Isamu was piloting, I gotta have my timer on sleep mode, but the one that Isamu was piloting are discontinued in favor of one that is completely AI controlled. They actually, I don't think, ever fully see in the show. You see flashes of it in the combat sequence, but I don't think you ever fully see it. The show is a fan of technology and the capabilities that technology allow people to achieve, and the collaborative effort of building things and of building the next things, but not a fan of the weaponizing or mobilization of it against the masses, including the people who developed it. If that sounds incredibly similar to the AI issues, that's probably not by accident. A lot of what people describe as AI could be just ascribed to software. You could describe something like Grammarly, and Grammarly it doesn't help that every tech company is now pitching itself as an AI company for money reasons, but Grammarly pitches itself as an AI company now. I've used Grammarly for a long time. When I signed up for Grammarly, I did not sign up thinking, oh, this is going to be an AI company in a couple of years. I signed up for it being, I am terrible at punctuation and spelling, and I just need a thing that will universally say, hey, put a period in here, put a colon in here, this is spelled wrong, this is the wrong which, this is the wrong this or that, and help me be just a nuts and bolts level better writer. And hilariously, I ignore a lot of the stylistic recommendations it makes, even though I probably shouldn't, because I have a very specific voice to my writing and I want to maintain that. But now it's an AI company. And the first thing they did was, one of the first things they've done is they've essentially attempted to clone people like Nilay Patel, the head editor over at The Verge. And if you've seen the episode of Decoder, we talked to the head of Grammarly, he leans in on him, and part of his point is, how much are you going to pay me? You're using my likeness. In practice, That's my property. You're using my face and name to generate profit as a selling point for you. How much of every sale that signs up and uses me to edit their articles or edit their papers or whatever do I get in return? And how do I manage that? How do I have control over that? And the head of Grammarly didn't really have an answer for him. I think what this OVA gets really right about technology and the building of technology, and the AI thing is almost separate, is that the technology will get built by people, but used by different people. You could argue very easily that the algorithmic internet leads pretty directly to AI. But when someone figured out the algorithmic internet, before we were too deep into that, we had things like StumbleUpon, which if you've ever used StumbleUpon, it's essentially a button you used to be able to set up on your browser. You just click it, and it just rockets through the internet and finds something weird. You could think it's cool, you could think it's nothing. It's essentially a randomizer button for your browser. Or it was. I don't think it exists anymore. But I'm sure they were tracking all that information and figured out, oh, this is the stuff people like from this the most. Why don't we start to promote those things? Why don't we remove the chronological feeds and replace them with feeds that are full of things that are more engaging, more arresting, all that stuff. And it's not far from that to AI that thinks you're the best. It's a little bit of the same thought process. I know I might not be making much sense, and I'm sure people will go at me in the comments, but that's like it's all connected there, and this show really understands that in a way that's pretty important. So, towards the end of the show, you have... Actually, before we do that, first, I want to say the thing that I was waiting 15 minutes to say. Thank you, YouTube. And that is, fuck Harmony Gold. Say it with me. If you like Macross, you know the chant from by heart. Fuck Harmony Gold. If you're wondering what Harmony Gold is, they are the people who hold the rights to Macross. And they have fairly recently, in the last 2 or 3 years, loosened their desk grip on it, and so we've been getting more Macross stuff. But for years, your options were this Macross Plus, or Do You Remember Love, or I forget what the alternative cut and version of Macross that premiered in the US was called, but that was the third one. Those were your real options. You didn't have much of an option of anything else. Like I said, I'm not entirely sure how I watched Macross Frontier as it aired, but I definitely did. And so, that aside, the story of this is also, it is a story of a group of actually more than 3 friends you come to realize pretty quickly. But a group of friends who had it where there was a serious interpersonal falling out at some point. And spoilers and also trigger warning here. By the end of the show, you realize that essentially Yoon fell for Isamu, and Guld, who was just probably from the entire telling of the entire show, felt constantly third wheel already, found out, attacks Yoon, and you're led to believe assaults her. And the worst part about the show just lets him come to that realization, but then doesn't do anything immediately with that. Isamu just like, it's okay, buddy. Let's fight the evil robot lady together. And it's like, that's not great. It's not quite that egregious, but it feels that egregious in watching it. And you're like, oh, that leaves a bad taste in your mouth. And then the reason why it leaves a bad taste in your mouth is because the show knows what he did is awful. And the point of the show is that it's so awful that he essentially mentally blocked it out. He traumatized himself out of remembering it and had been blaming Isamu for it the entire time. And so unlike many shows where you can point out and be like, well, it was a different time. No, this show knows what he did was beyond the pale and makes him a piece of shit. And still gives him well, let's go fight the evil thing, buddy, as make good. And it just doesn't feel great. But it also, in that same breath, it makes it like the show, he has a whole reckoning of he's in his fighter, and he's realizing that he's been such a piece of shit. He comes to this understanding that it's like, I've been a piece of shit to you for shit I did decades ago. I've been going after Yoon romantically decades ago, and you guys have essentially just let me do it. I'm the biggest piece of garbage ever. But, like I said, the show itself doesn't have enough follow-through to make that count for much. If I had a major critique of the dynamic of the three characters, that would be it. It's the fact that one character just physically and sexually assaults another character. And everybody treats it like, crazy night at the OK Corral. No. Like, the show is framing it as bad as it is. But once you zoom out from the flashback, they don't do anything to make that real. Yoon's just truly romantically torn between the two of them for a period of time. And Isamu at no point says, dude, you tried to force her to sleep with you, at the very least. If not, did in front of my eyes. It's not cool. Not only was it not cool, but it will never be cool ever. These are not things that people get over, at the very least, easily, usually at all. For good reason. If the show had a fault, it's that it drops the pretty fairly interesting thing it's doing with Guld as being very manosphere captured human being in favor of the AI plotline of AI has gone rogue and evil and wants to bang Isamu on the ethereal plane and everywhere else it can figure out and remove anybody who gets in her way. And it's just, on that level, it's a real mess. And if that kind of thing gets to you, I would probably recommend that you go into this, at the very least, with caution, because it's a little clear what happened in the past, but it's not clear how it happened, it's not clear who the perpetrator was, and once you find out, it's an unignorable part of the show, obviously. But if that kind of stuff is not your thing, I would suggest maybe this isn't for you, because it's in there no matter what you do, unfortunately. However, what's the best word for it? The mode with which this show once again talks about AI and the inevitability, particularly the AI engineer character talks about Sharon as the next thing, is so eerily similar to what we're dealing with right now with all the AI companies trying to shove all this stuff down our throats, in that the advances in AI and neural network and neural control systems that are happening in the show are incredible. And they could be useful to somebody. But there's a lot of propping up as if they are more than what they are. The effective end of the AI engineer jackass is that he'll become convinced that Sharon Apple wants him to join her, and he jumps into the abyss and I'm pretty sure dies. But even before that, he's intensely creepy, disrespectful of Yoon, disrespectful of her personal autonomy and personal space. And he has this at-all-costness that sounds similar to what you hear people like Sam Altman running around saying. And it's just like, it's pretty prescient of a thing. If you're looking for something, it was like, how quickly did they find this? And John Oliver just did a story on AI chatbots, and the first one, I forget its name, was actually created in the 60s. And even that far back, it was people were eerily attached to it. But, so it's no surprise that by 1995, people, especially creative people who probably would have had knowledge of that early 60s first chatbot, were having real thoughts about, oh, this could be a problem in these specific ways. What does it look like when you have human longing for another human minus the human control over emotion and deep understanding of what that emotion is, that it's not this sycophantic, single-minded focus that is all-encompassing and all that your brain can think about. We as humans love each other and love other people, but we also get up and go to work. If someone, hey, do you love this person? And you're like, yeah. And then your next thought is not, and I'm going to kill everybody who gets in my way. Whoa. That's a leap of logic that feels very computer-like. It actually reminds me of a flaw that used to be in Civilization, and that was nuclear Gandhi. If you know anything about Civilization, for a while, Gandhi had this, if you played as India and you played as Gandhi, there was this flaw where if you tried to achieve, I think, the pacifist victory, Gandhi would eventually go full nuclear and nuke all the other countries. Because that was the quickest way to peace in the system that ran civilizations. It's like a well-known weird glitch that was true for a while. But I found it really interesting to watch this in the context of where everything's at right now. If you want to watch it, I believe it's available on Apple TV. It's available on Apple TV to rent or buy. I don't think it's probably that expensive either, but you can definitely go find it some way. I'm sure they did a Blu-ray release of it because, like I said, it's one of the few on-ramps into Macross that has just always been available in America for as long as it's been made. So that's actually where I'm going to leave it.
Hey, I hope you enjoyed the podcast, and if you did, be sure to subscribe wherever you're listening or watching. If you're listening to it on a podcast platform and they allow you to give a 5-star review, be sure to do that. If you're watching this on YouTube and you really liked what you saw, be sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel and like the video. In addition, if you want to make sure that you don't miss a beat, be sure to hit that notification bell so you know when new episodes drop. But if you're wondering, they drop every Thursday night Eastern time. And on that note, if you really love the podcast and you really love what I'm trying to do here, be sure to give the website a look. That website is bento-box.ghost.io. There will be a link in the description of either this podcast or this video. It'll also be linked in the description of the entire podcast on the information page. It'll also be linked in the description of the YouTube channel. So there's plenty of ways for you to get to that website and check it out. If you want to follow me, my social links are also listed in the footer of that page. So once again, go over there to find that stuff. But I hope you like the episode. I look forward to talking to you next time. But until next time, I have been Alex. This has been Bento Radio, and I'll talk at you later.